If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this. What's the eeriest thing that has ever happened to you? Serious. When I worked in memory care, I had a patient that insisted that I had a little girl. She was 2, and she was born in October. I told the patient that I didn't have a 2-year-old little girl. She swore up and down I had this little girl, until she looked at me soberly and said, "Oh, that's right, your baby died in March." What creeped me out was that I had a pretty brutal miscarriage in March, and I was due in October. At the time this exchange happened, the child I lost would have been 2. Still freaks me out when I think about it. There was no way the patient would have known that. She barely knew my name. Our house was built in the 1920s and had 2 main floors. The living room, kitchen, dining room, and my parents' bedroom were on the first. The second floor had 3 bedrooms my siblings shared with me, 2 larger rooms and 1 small room with a cubby-like closet. Growing up, 3 of my older sisters tried sleeping in it, but all would get nightmares and lucid dreams seeing a pale little girl crouching looking out through the cubby or standing beside their bed. The longest any of them lasted was a year before my parents gave up and turned it into a storage room. One night while laying in bed, I kept hearing footsteps and shuffling in the storage room beside me. At first I thought I was just hearing things until my mom came upstairs and asked me if I was okay and why I wasn't in bed. I told her it wasn't me, that it was in the other room. I was just glad she heard it too and that I wasn't going crazy but was extremely unsettled. I obviously couldn't sleep at all, and about an hour later it started again. I tried to ignore it the best I could until the storage room's door slammed shut hard enough to latch it. The door hadn't been able to latch in years. I hid under the blankets and my mom came to check on me again. She made me look in the room with her where we found things shuffled everywhere. I slept with the lights on for the next month and to this day will not go in it by myself. The air inside is heavy and you can feel something in there. For the next few days my dad and I tried everything we could think of to debunk what happened, but we were never able to find the answer. I still get goosebumps thinking about it. I had a really good friend that lived far away in a different state. I hadn't talked to him for a while, which wasn't entirely unusual in that period of our lives. I had a dream about him one night. The next day I was washing my car and had a sudden, urgent feeling that I should call him. I went back inside to grab my phone, which had a voicemail from him asking me to call him because he'd been in a coma for 2 weeks and had just woken up earlier that day. So I live right on the highway. As soon as I step off my driveway it's 2 lanes with traffic flying by, except at night when it massively slows down. I work the closing shift at the nearby grocery store, so I'm used to being up late, so I take walks down the highway. A week ago I'm walking home, which is northeast. In the last 30 minutes that I've been walking, a thick wall of fog has come into existence and I'm loving how beautiful it is. Now my walks are about an hour and a half long on average. Walk to the grocery store I work at, which takes 30 minutes, then hang out for like 30 minutes, then walk home, and there's a stretch of the highway with no nearby lights at all and it's between the grocery store and the bar. I was walking along that stretch and a car drove past me heading northeast like I was. They quickly dissolve into the fog except for their tail lights, which shine happily through. And I watch as the tail lights stop shrinking and then disappear before becoming headlights heading towards me very slowly. The car drives past me again and I think to myself, that's weird. They go maybe 60 feet southwest past me before I hear them try to U-turn again and not go into the gravel on the side of the road. And in that moment I dove off the highway and into the ditch where the gravel harshly slopes down and I lay as flat as I can. I watch as their headlights creep towards me, then see another pair come from the north which seemed to make the U-turner freak and make another U-turn heading southwest again. I waited for a minute or so thinking that I would hear a car door shut as they would be getting out to try to find me and do whatever they had wanted to do before I climbed back up and sprinted to the bar where I felt safer knowing other people were nearby. The entire rest of my walk was horrifying as I waited for the car to return. I haven't taken a real walk since then, which sucks because it was so nice being so totally alone and be moving and just loving the world. When I was a kid I had a very vivid case of deja vu. I had a detailed memory of owning this pink ballet themed journal. One day I actually got the exact journal from my grandma. I was very confused upon receiving it since I thought I already had one. I searched high and low for the one that I thought I had before and could never find it. Another time I got a watch for Christmas. I am notorious of losing/breaking jewelry, so I decided to wear the watch in bed. Woke up the next morning, and it was gone. Never found it again, and we even moved from that house. When I was around 11 or 12, I watched an episode of Scooby-Doo in my bedroom. I started imitating the way old Scoob said the word spooky, all drawn out and doing the token scary sounding fluctuations. I kept repeating it aloud and faster while walking around the room. I let out one last long spooky while facing an aluminum container on my nightstand. It moved off the edge and crashed to the floor. Startled, I ran out of the room. The container was about 8 inches in diameter and maybe 7 inches tall. It was a Snickers holiday gift tin. In it were the various trinkets accumulated during an 80s childhood, micro machines, Happy Meal toys, freebie keychains, etc. It was about half full and had some weight to it. It was near the edge of the nightstand, but not hanging over it. Now maybe the air currents from the SP sound and spooky caused it to move the 2 to 4 or so to fall. I was probably about 4 feet away when I spoke towards it. I don't know. But it's something that creeped me out and I wish I had a good explanation. My sister had started undergrad and was home for summer. A guy called and wanted to have her take part in a university survey. I said she wasn't home, so the guys asked me to do it. I was 16 at the time and the questions started out normal enough, but they got more risque and sexuality oriented as it went on. I thought, well, it's a university study, I guess they could be studying that kind of stuff. An hour goes by and I'm like, look, I gotta get to work, and he says, don't go, I'm almost finished, and that's when I hung up. I think about the midway point was when the questions got sexual and probably when he started jerking off. I asked my sister later, did you sign up for a phone survey? She said no, and when I told her about it she agreed it was some creep trying to get off. A while back a buddy of mine were in my room playing League of Legends. My door was open because of how hot the day was, so I wanted to have some airflow to cool us down. About to head into a team fight, something moved from my periphery and I swear it was a tiny kid. I stopped and looked at my buddy and asked if he just saw a kid at my door, and he agreed that he saw a small child. I got up and started to look around. From what I saw was a tiny kid with a blue shirt and black bottoms. I could not tell if they were long shorts or jeans. At the time my parents had some guest over, so wanted to get back to the game. I just assumed it was a kid of theirs. Later, after everything died down, I asked my parents if the people who came over had a kid with blue top and black bottoms, and they both said that they didn't have a kid. To this day I never found out if what we saw was real or not. Just weird that we both saw the same thing. Not to me, but to my oldest brother when he was about 5 years old at the time. He's 36 years old now, but he has sworn by the story ever since, but he hasn't told it in years, but I figure it's a hard subject for him. Anyway, I had my mom tell me again how it happened. She said we lived in a part of Corpus Christi in Texas where it was kind of rural but still had neighbors, and we lived next to a canyon. So one night he wakes up needing to go to the bathroom and he brings his blanket with him because it was cold. After exiting he saw strange lights shine through the windows illuminating the entire inside of the house, so he goes downstairs. Seeing as how everything in the house is dark again, he gets a little bit scared and goes up the stairs again, but he puts the covers over himself and he sort of gets on his elbows and knees and moves like a soldier with through mud up the stairs. That's when he said he felt footsteps on him, so he stops moving. And we had one dog at the time, but he said he felt so many footsteps on him, and he actually had bruising the next day, but he said the footsteps lasted for a good couple minutes, like things marching across and over him. He could smell cardboard all of a sudden when he peeked from under the covers and saw strange short figures that really smelled heavily of cardboard. Too scared to move, he eventually fell back asleep on the stairs under his covers, and my mom found him the next morning, and that's when he told her all about it. My mom did believe him to a lot of an extent because of how afraid he was and how much the experience stuck with him, but she only fully believed absolutely 100% after when he was a teenager and she read the book called Communion, and how the author described the alien smelling of cardboard and other descriptions that my brother had told her that in no way he could have known from the book cause he was just a little kid at the time, and she threw down the book and never continued reading it. Creepy thing that happened to me years ago, back when I was in high school. I was staying over my friend's house one night, and this was probably around 1 a.m. on a Saturday night, morning, when we were still partying and playing video games, you know, stuff like that. Anyway, him and his friends asked me to go downstairs in the basement and grab them some soda cans that are in a fridge. It's a 2-story house, excluding the basement, and nobody else is home except us, say about 7, including me. The first floor is dark and dead silent, but I make my way to the basement door and go downstairs. I open the door and hit the lights for the basement, enter, I get some soda from the fridge and make my way back upstairs from the basement and hit the lights again and close the door behind me. The moment I close the door and turn off the lights, I suddenly hear this rapid ascension coming from the basement. It sounded like someone in heavy boots was running up the stairs and was about to slam open the door any second. Within a split second, I dropped the cans of soda, flinched and immediately put my arms up in a defensive stance. I was mostly covering my face in fear and panic, bracing for whatever the hell is about to come out the door. Nothing. I grab the cans and run back upstairs, never looking behind me. I go back up to greet my company, and my friend and his friends look at me and start guffawing in laughter, saying that I look like I'd just seen a ghost, to which I respond, yeah, no shit. My friend asks me what happened and I tell him there's someone else in the basement. They start to get this semi-serious look on their faces, and I implore each and every one of them to go downstairs with me to the basement. 3 of us, including my friend, go downstairs and approach the basement door. My friend cautiously opens the door and hits the lights, with us slowly making our way down. Nothing. We look around the place to see if there are any signs of a possible intruders. Nope, nothing. Nothing broken, out of place, missing, no footprints, strange smells, nothing at all. We check every nook and cranny of the entire house, even some parts outside, but we yield nothing. We head back inside. The rest of the guys stay, but as for me, I decided to call it a day and leave. I still have no idea what happened. I've been trying to rationalize it ever since. Maybe I was hallucinating. I think the most likely explanation was that those assholes were screwing around with me, purposely stomping up and down to make it sound like there was someone in the basement rushing up the stairs just behind me. That's probably also why they were laughing at me when they saw my face. Or maybe they were making a lot of noise, but with no malice. It was just a coincidence at that moment, and nothing more. It still felt so real, though, and it was deadly quiet on the first floor, so I'm sure it couldn't have been them, otherwise I would have heard them from above. And they genuinely looked worried when I told them I thought there was someone else in the basement. I think it's just best that I don't know the cause, hallucinations, pranks or otherwise. I still look behind my back when I'm alone in my own house to this day, especially with basement stairs. I'm especially cautious to any footsteps or thumping sounds that even remotely sound like someone walking in boots when I'm alone indoors. I used to work night shift in the emergency room, 5P5A, doing patient registration and insurance verification. One night around 2 a car comes screeching up to the main emergency entrance. There was a woman doing CPR on a man in the front passenger seat. The nurses came running with the doctor and put him on a stretcher to the trauma room. They worked on him for a good 10 minutes before they pronounced him. And as soon as they pronounced him, the power went out. The air got super cold and thick, and all of the hair on the back of my neck and on my arms stood straight up. Within seconds of the power going out, the backup generator came on and the chime went off to say that a new baby was just born. It was the eeriest, freakiest thing that ever happened in the 2 years I worked in that hospital. One night my parents were out. It was about midnight and I, being the oldest, was watching my brother, who was going into 6th grade at the end of summer, his friend, my sister going into 7th grade, her friend, and my 5-year-old brother. My older brother, we will call B1, and his friend, we will call F1, were downstairs playing games on their phones with me. We were at the kitchen table, which is right next to the back door. I was focusing on my game until I saw a flash of light. I didn't think it was storming, but whatever, and no sound came with the light. F1 speaks and says, "Did anyone else see that light?" I said, "You saw that too?" I say there for a second trying to think of what it could be, and I was getting creeped out. The reason this freaked me out so much was that same week, 3 days before, this car started to follow me and my brother down the street as we were coming home from the pool at 10 p.m. There was a flashing light, probably a camera flash, going off from the back seat a bunch. I started walking up the driveway I was next to and the car sped off. I went upstairs and decided to get a head check on everyone and at least move our gaming operation upstairs. As I'm going up, I check the window by our stairs and the night sky is clear. I ran up, got B2, I then told my sister and her friend, F2. My sister is not calm at all in situations like this and she freaked out. I was pretty unnerved too, but kept my composure. We locked ourselves in my parents' room because it was the only room with a lock, to make us feel better. F2 peered out window and she thought she saw someone standing outside, but she couldn't tell, neither could I. I figured it could be some kids playing with flashlights in the street behind us. My parents came home after we told them and we all went downstairs to talk. I see another flash from my living room and I think about it for a second, feeling much better. My parents were home. I said, "Anyone else see that flash?" My sister and F2 hadn't seen a flash, but F2 says I did actually. We went to bed and it wasn't until the next morning I realized a flashlight couldn't illuminate our whole back door from the street behind us, as it was in front of the houses behind us a good 200 yards at least. Nothing else came of that, but some other stuff has happened in our backyard, just not as major as that. B1 says he saw something white dart across our backyard in the middle of night, but no one else was down there because he stays up the latest. Another incident occurred at around 11 to 12 p.m. to me this time. This was recent, almost a month ago. I was sitting on my bed listening to music when I heard a series of knocks coming from my wall, It wasn't just a bang, it was a pattern actually, and it came one more time right next to my head, which was at the head of my bed. I kept listening to my music thinking my sister did it. Not 5 minutes later it happened again. I get up to tell my sister to stop banging on the wall when I realized the banging was coming from the other side of the wall, but the other side of the wall is my backyard and I'm on the second floor. I double checked that my sister didn't bang on the wall, but she didn't. We looked in the back but saw nothing, and that was that. That's all of my experiences right now, and hopefully for a while. When I was about 11/12, we lived in this house out in the country in South Dakota. It was a pretty big place but only had 3 bedrooms, which my 2 brothers and I had to share one. I slept on a twin-size mattress on one side of the room closest to the door, and my oldest and youngest brothers shared a bigger bed on the opposite side. Every night before going to bed, my brothers and I would pray out loud together, and afterwards we would make the sign of the cross, in the name of the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit, over our bodies. Then we would kiss the cross that we made with our fingers. Well, for some reason, one day my mom told us not to kiss the cross anymore afterwards. We all agreed, and later that night we got done praying and we made the sign of the cross again. Then I heard a kiss pretty close to me. It was dark in the room and I just said out loud, "Guys, Mom said not to do the kiss thing anymore." Which they both replied at the same time, "We didn't, we thought you did." I got really bad goosebumps and prayed silently until I fell asleep. Pretty creepy. This recurring dream. For the last 4 nights in a row I keep having a nightmare with Jeff Goldblum in it. So we're in this super dark house both wearing sick leather jackets. Like some Hardy Boys type stuff. Anyway, we found 3 bodies with no skin. I said, "What the fuck?" Jeff Goldblum said, "You shouldn't swear, but yay, this is wild, right?" We see a side door, I open it. 50 yards back is a steel building and there's a gravel drive leading to it, and lining this drive is a wood post fence. About 30 feet away there's this super weird little thing. Probably about 3 feet tall, big bulbous round head. With no eyes, just black pits. And it gets just a bit closer and you see this stitched together patchwork of skin hanging loosely off of it because it's all way too big. It sees me, rips off the arm skin, and there's this gnarled looking gray arm that's super skinny and points at me. It lets out this soul wrenching screech and slowly walks towards me. Jeff Goldblum puts his hand on my shoulder and says, "You should wake up now, buddy," and then I do. Every night I've had the dream the thing is closer. Last night I could smell it even when I woke up. First year of college. I flunked my calculus exam so bad, 80% of the class got a score of 15% and below, was one of them. Was pissed at myself and really depressed about what happened. Went out of the dorm later that same night, around 1 am-ish. I was just crying outside my dorm when a guy approached me and asked me about what happened. Then I told him everything, and the pressure that's building up inside me because of college, and it's the best college we have at the Philippines, which adds pressure even more. Then he just went and comforted me about what happened and told me to look at it on another angle and such. Was really relieved and felt better talking to the guy. I also asked him where he lived so I can treat him out to lunch sometime for the help he gave. We bid our farewells and it was the best sleep I've had ever since I went to college. I never saw the guy's face since the place was pretty dim, but he told me he lived underneath our room. The housing complex/dorm I'm in is on the side of a hill. So weird architecture. The next morning I felt more alive, and I immediately head to my landlady to ask about the guy I met last night. She told me that nobody has ever stayed in that room for years. Even gave me the key to the room. Went and saw a really dusty room that hasn't had any people live in it for years. Ever since then, I always wonder who, or what, was the guy I talked to, and I haven't thanked him properly yet. I saw a shadow person. When I was about 17, I was at my friend's apartment building, which his parents owned. It was a pretty old building in the Pilsen neighborhood of Chicago, and according to his dad it used to be owned by Al Capone, but I'm not sure how true that was. We had an apartment on the top floor that they let us use to just hang out, and it allowed us easy access to the roof out we could go smoke cigarettes. One night, we were about to go up, but I had to pee, so I told him I'd meet him up there. After I was done, I went up the stairs to the attic portion that was connected to the roof. There were no lights, so we always used our phones to guide us. We had those old flip phones without lights, so you only had the light from the screen to help navigate the cluttered mess that was up there. As I made my way to the roof door, I saw a shadow pass by me. Now this wasn't like the shadow of something moving with the light of my phone. This shadow felt solid like a person. I followed the direction it went thinking it was my friend. I kept saying that I knew it was him and to stop playing around. It passed me a few more times, before heading to the other side of the attic, and that's when I heard my friend's voice from downstairs. He got a call from his girlfriend and was in another room talking to her the whole time. I have no idea what that shadow figure was, but it really freaked me out and I told my friend what happened and that I did not want to go back up there. Back in 1994, I was in my final year of high school. The street I lived on, my best friend also lived on. We had known each other since around 4 or 5. Went all through school together. Played at each other's homes endlessly. So this one day, I felt a bit out of sorts. I couldn't really explain it, and I decided to go for a walk and get fresh air. Something that I rarely did at that time. The previous time I did something like that was probably months if not a full year before, so it wasn't a regular routine. I walked down the street and past his house. I saw his mom putting out some garbage for the next day's pickup, but I didn't say anything to her. I remember feeling very weird as I passed their house. I don't know the best way to describe it. Not sad, maybe depressed, or anxious. Unsettled is probably a better word. I kind of shrugged it off, and continued my walk for the next 15 minutes or so and returned home. After being home for about half an hour, there's a knock at my door. My mom answers it, and says it's for me. So I go down, and there's my friend, eyes red and puffy, face wet with tears. How my mom completely missed this, is beyond me. So I ask him what's wrong, and he blurts out my dad died today. I had known his dad for as long as I'd known him, so it was a bit of a shock. We sat on my porch and talked for about an hour. It was very uncomfortable for me, since that sort of thing was new to me. I didn't know what to say, so I let him do most of the talking. Now, the caveat to this was, his dad died of lung cancer, he was a non-smoker. His mom didn't want anyone to know, for whatever reason, and so I wasn't told. However, I had 2 hints months earlier that something was up. I saw a wheelchair in their house once, but his dad was in the medical profession. So I assumed it was something to do with that.
And the second, I once saw his dad with a baseball cap on in the house as he walked upstairs.
Something I had never ever seen him wear ever, inside or out. But even with that info, and suspicions that maybe he was fighting cancer, in the back of my head. Why on that specific day, did I need to get out and go for a walk, and why did I head toward their house, and why did I pause by the house and get a weird sensation? Probably all coincidence, but who knows? I was about 5 or so, and we had just moved from Massachusetts to Texas to take care of my grandma. She was 70, had been fighting cancer for about 5 to 6 years, and it had spread pretty much throughout her whole body, so she was on home hospice. She was in a wheelchair the few times she was awake during the day, and always had an oxygen tank on her. It started as lung cancer because she smoked for so long. All other times she was in a cot like you'd see in any hospital, colostomy bag, for the works. My mom mainly took care of her, but there was an on-call nurse as well to change out medical things and just do general palliative care and checkups. I remember this very clearly, so I really don't believe it was a dream at all. I remember getting up in the middle of the night once and going out into the kitchen to get a drink. Now, we kept my grandma in the living room/den area because it had more room in it, and I had to pass through there to get to the kitchen. I was planning on snitching a soda from the fridge. I was a little shit who knew I shouldn't have it, so I was banking on my grandma being asleep. She most definitely was not. My grandma asked me what I was doing, as she could be kind of stern, so I lied and said I wanted some water. She was content with this, and then proceeded to get uncovered and swing her legs off the side of her cot. She used her forerack to ease herself onto the floor, and then started hobbling off in the other direction. I was only 5, but I understood the situation and how delicate she was. Even if I didn't really understand death or dying yet, I could tell how skinny and sick she was and that it was a big deal. I always had to be careful with her when we were playing. She liked to watch me play video games on our old Sega Genesis. Sometimes she'd play columns with me, or when I wanted to cuddle or something. I asked my grandma where she was going, because I couldn't recall her ever going anywhere without her wheelchair. She told me she needed to go pee, and that no, I didn't have to wake my mom up to help her. I shrugged it off, told her goodnight and I loved her, ran off to steal a Coke, then hightailed it back to my room before she could see my deed. The next day, I woke up to a bunch of commotion and was told my grandma had passed away the night before. Like I said, I didn't understand death at this point, so when I saw people zipping her up into that black bag I was more confused than anything. My older sister, in her late teens at the time, tried to explain it to me, through her sobs, but all I remember was jumping on the bed without a care in the world. Don't get me wrong, I love this woman, it just never really quite hit me. Years later the subject comes up again, and I recall the experience to my mom. I told her that I couldn't believe Grammy died that same night that I saw her walk. Maybe it was a heart attack or something that made it sudden, but my mom was stuck on the fact I said that she walked. She told me that Grammy was paralyzed from the waist down, And that's when I realized that's why I'd never seen her without the wheelchair. To this day, I cannot be convinced that I dreamt it. It's far too clear in my mind, and I've never had any other dream that clear. My mom chalks it up to the Lord was bringing her home, but given that I'm no longer religious, I can't bring myself to accept that explanation either. Remembering that experience with the new context of knowing she was paralyzed from the waist down at the time always seemed so surreal to me. Happened years ago on a dark summer night at 3 a.m. on the dot. Being bored teenage boys, me and my friend who lived down the road would sneak out to have a smoke. As we were walking out of his driveway, we hear a gut-wrenching scream of a woman calling out for help. She was screaming as if she was being repeatedly stabbed. The screaming was really loud, but in the darkness we couldn't pinpoint where it was from. I instantly turned around and ran back in the house. My friend followed behind me. Now here's where it gets fucking creepy. We brought a video camera out with us to record our little night journey. Once inside, we play back the video to listen for the screams again, but we never heard it in the playback. It was just a video of us saying what the fuck while panicking and running back terrified into the house, apparently from nothing. Driving home one very hot evening, took a route that took us in an area of oil refinery storage tanks on either side of the road. Kind of a no man's land, and I see an old lady with short hair trudging along with a backpack. Looks like she's seen better days. I just think, poor old gal, as we drive past. But my wife says, should we call the police? I'm like, why? It's still daylight. She'll be okay. My wife says, she? That boy could not have been more than 15 years old. I say, boy? It was a transient old crone. We debate a bit, then I turn around and drive past again. Now I'm on the side to get a better view. Holy shit. How did I see it so wrong? It's a kid. As I start to tell my wife she was right, she says, oh. Sorry, you were right. She sees the old lady now. We're looking at the same person. As we drive back by to head home, one more glance, neither of us were sure of anything and to this day have no idea what that was we saw. I was at a funeral with my boyfriend for the tragic death of an 18-year-old family friend of his. He was really torn up about it. He was one of the pallbearers. After the graveside ceremony, when everyone is mingling, this lady came up to us. My BF and I were holding each other, both crying, and she straight up inserted her arm between us to break up the grieving and introduced herself as a pastor's wife. The pastor she mentioned was no one that was involved in the funeral, and we had never heard of him, so we were a little confused by this point. She had gray, unkempt, frizzy hair and white eyes. Cataracts, I guess, but she looked like someone out of a horror movie. She took my boyfriend's hand and looked him in the eyes with an unwavering gaze and said that he knew in his heart that he wasn't right with the Lord. He needed to accept this fact and change his actions to get on the right path because Jesus has a plan for him. She kept repeating, Jesus is watching you and it isn't good, and told me I should watch out. We just smiled and nodded and went on our way. It was so intense, not to mention highly inappropriate for the scenario. When we got in the car we were like, what in the actual hell was that? Also, he's a Christian and lives a pretty behaved life. He's literally never even had a sip of alcohol. Fast forward to the next day. I have a Facebook request from some old man. I brush it off. 30 minutes later it clicks in my brain. That's the pastor, whose wife spoke to us, remember the last name from her introduction. I do some stalking and it's a legit page, and I recognize seeing him at that funeral. I find his wife's page and all her photos are of her dressed in clown suits and clown makeup. The strangest part of it is, my boyfriend doesn't have a Facebook. We obviously don't have the same last name. I never introduced myself or gave her any inclination to what my name could be. They had to have asked the family our names because that is the only explanation to them finding me. Immediately declined his request and blocked them both because y'all ain't coming at me with that demon shit. Bye. Used to take drugs pretty heavily, and a side effect I noticed even hours after the effect of the drug had worn off, I could get some hallucinations at random. I was walking down a road in the middle of the night home from a friend's house. It was extremely dark, so it was hard to see anything, yet I felt like I could see a person across the street from me. I eyed the character the entire time while continuing to walk, and I noticed something was really off with the person. Their clothes were completely pitch black, yet a street light wasn't too far away. I noticed that the light emitted onto the street around the person, yet not on the person themselves. My mind had been racing with loads of ideas up to that point, but when I realized that part, I started to think it might be a hallucination. I called out to it and actually got a response, but the response was from behind, and it was a middle-aged woman who wondered who I was trying to talk to. The character was still there when I looked again, and I realized I probably needed to lower the amount of drugs. Used to go on adventures with my ex late at night. Would pretty much drive out to the country. One time we made it to a very secluded set of roads, fields for days and the occasional factory, no street lights and no other cars around. I pulled into one of the factories to turn around and head home. It had a few lights on the wall that were very dim and some flashing, typical horror movie building kind of vibe. Anyways, for some reason when I pulled in, instead of turning around automatically I sat there for a while we both stared at the building. All of a sudden I get a mix of emotions, a mix of hopelessness, fear, and depression. My stomach sunk and I felt the need to get out of there as quick as possible. That's when my ex started screaming, telling me to get the fuck out of there. Apparently she felt it too. We obviously never went back. I don't believe in paranormal stuff, but that feeling was something I never felt before. I'm guessing it's what people feel when they feel the presence of a demon or ghost. I have two stories, one that I remember and one that was told to me by my family. For the first one, this happened when I was a baby. I was a newborn, so I couldn't move by myself. My mom went to pick up my brother across the street, leaving me alone. She was gone for less than 5 minutes and had left all the doors locked. When she got back I was no longer in my crib. I had disappeared. She couldn't find me anywhere, which prompted her to call my dad, who rushed from work, and the cops. They spent about 4 hours searching for me everywhere. Out of nowhere I reappear next to my crib at nightfall. Nobody could explain what happened. Okay, story number 2. It was my first year of college. I had been broken up with my abusive ex for a couple of months, but he still kept trying to stalk, call, text, messages, anything for me to talk to him. It got to the point where I chose a college 4 hours away from Houston. I sleep with my bedroom door locked. Always have. I dreamt this, or actually woke up in the middle of the night to hear my dorm room unlock. I had my own room in my dorms and the locks are these huge, loud, clunky magnetic locks. So, I see this dark figure just walking towards me and I try to scream for one of my suite mates, but nothing. I blacked out. I opened my eyes again eventually and the figure is sitting on the foot of my bed. It's my ex. I'm freaking out trying to scream. He keeps apologizing and saying he's going to finally leave me alone. The next morning one of his friends messaged me that he had been murdered the previous. So I was pretty freaked out, to say the least. Here is my true story, even if no one believes me. I remember most of the individual dreams, but I'll summarize instead of typing a novel. When I was about 6 to 8 years old, I think, for about a week and a half, I had a continuing nightmare. No matter when I woke up, went back to sleep, etc., I always started the dream at the exact place I had left off. I couldn't sleep at night because I was so afraid, and I remember being so tired I dozed off in class, only to be in this goddamn nightmare even then. In the beginning of the dream, I had found a briefcase with money in it. I took the money, and for the next week every night I would be chased by this very creepy man who dressed in all black, who I assumed was the owner of the money. Some of the dream time was normal, like I would be playing in the playground at school. Then suddenly he'd appear, and I'd try to run away. This theme repeated a few times, until finally the man began to bribe my friends and family to give me up, and they were willing. A funny aside to this is that he bribed my dog with cigarettes. So, realizing that I had no one I could trust and the man was getting close to catching me, I decided to make a break for it. I bought a bus ticket, making sure I didn't know where the bus was going, because I somehow knew that if I knew then somehow he would know. I was sitting on the bus bench, waiting for this escape bus, when he simply walked up to me and sat down next to me. I was so tired at this point, even in my dream apparently, that I just sat there, waiting for whatever this dude was going to do to me. He said, "Is this really all worth it?" Realizing that I was miserable and would rather just give back the money than keep running, I told him no, it's not. I gave him the briefcase of money and woke up. Never dreamed of it again. My family always used to say the local forest behind my grandparents' house was cursed or haunted or something. Dogs acting weird, monster-like silhouettes following you home from the tree line, etc. No, they weren't just trolling. They genuinely believed this stuff. My mom, my uncles, my older brother, etc. So one day I'm feeling brave and want to go ghost hunting or whatever, not really buying into the stories but was bored. I was about 14 and my older brother was like 18 or 19. We went to the forest on a full moon at midnight, for extra effect. We're walking around and it's quiet and there's literally nothing. After an hour I say fuck this and we start heading home. I was obviously disappointed because I wanted to see what the hype was about. A little while later, almost at the park entrance, my brother grabs my arm and tells me to shut up. He heard someone following us. I laugh that he's trying to scare me, but he grabs my mouth and motions for me to be quiet. I can tell he's being quite serious. I try to listen carefully but couldn't hear anything, so I turn around and as I do, A tall black shadowy silhouette crosses from one side of the path to the other, in a diagonal direction towards us, and disappearing into the tree line. I only saw it for a second because it moved so fast, and was kinda like, crouching, like you knew it was trying to be stealthy, and it was. I didn't hear it cross the gravel and it was super quick. It also didn't look or move like a human, but it definitely wasn't a fucking fox or raccoon either. Whoever or whatever it was, I knew it was hostile, and my survival instincts kicked in. I legitimately knew our lives were in danger at that moment. My brother later collaborated that he felt the exact same way. In complete terror, I yell at my brother, "Run!" And we both took off. This is the crazy part. We are sprinting down this dark path in the woods, and we could fucking hear this person or thing chasing us, and could feel it closing in just feet behind us. I dared not turn around to see, because I knew if I slowed for a second it would catch us, and it felt fucking evil. Finally, we make it out of the woods through a little shortcut that led into someone's backyard. Luckily they had their backyard lights on so you could see into the tree line clearly. We sprint into this person's yard, into the light, and turn to face our attacker head on because now we can actually fucking see. As soon as we turn around and look into the forest, there was nothing. No sound, no movement, and you couldn't see past the first line of trees and bushes. Then we sort of saw a shadow move in the distance, and out of nowhere a rock struck me in the chest and fell and landed on my shoe. I looked down and it was a piece of gravel from the first original path we were on when I first saw the creature. My brother and I said fuck that and turned and ran all the way home. Years later, actually just a few months ago, I'm 24 now, I was talking to my brother, now 29, and asked if he remembered that night. He confirmed that he didn't set it up or have his friend scare me or whatever, and that he had no idea WTF that was about. He said he felt the same way, that our lives were in danger, and he felt the person/creature inches behind us, easily catching up as we sprinted out of the forest, and was the first and only time he ever felt his life truly in danger. He said that was actually the last time he's ever gone into that forest at night, and I know for a fact that's the case for me. So yeah, that's the most terrifying thing I've ever gone through, and to this day, I know whatever or whoever I saw that night was fucking evil, and it meant us harm. I get goosebumps thinking about it.